Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to another episode of the Rice Crypto Show. I am your host, Chris Rice Crypto. And in today's episode, I have an interview with Tron Black, who is the lead developer for Ravencoin. Now, before we get into today's interview, if this is your first time ever checking out any of my content, I encourage you to explore my channel, check out my past videos. If you like what I'm doing, support me by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing. I'm also doing a contest, and the only way you can enter is by being a subscriber. And that video is going to be on my YouTube channel, so you can check that video out on how to enter my YouTube Crypto Swag giveaway contest. So without further ado, let's get into today's interview. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by Tron Black, who is the lead developer for Ravencoin. Thanks for joining us today, Tron. How you doing?
Hi, thanks. Doing great. Glad to be here.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. I'm personally a big fan of the Ravencoin project. And the point I wanted to do with this interview is to kind of give a little bit of a basic education about what Ravencoin is. But before we get into Ravencoin, do you mind giving us a little bit of a background about who Tron Black is and how you got into cryptocurrency?
Sure. So I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. Was doing internet utilities kind of back in the mid 90s, and ran into Bitcoin in 2013, early 2013, and kind of stopped doing anything else, started doing cryptocurrencies, mining, trading, investing, started a company that did accounting for it, and then eventually went to work for Medici Ventures, and then as part of that, I got involved in the Ravencoin project.
Okay. So now, did you do any development on like Bitcoin at all, or any other project before?
Not specifically on a coin. I was doing a project that basically linked up your crypto accounts to exchanges and to blockchains and things like that, so that you could say, where's my Bitcoin? If you're a miner, it would connect to the APIs that the mining pools have, to the exchanges APIs, and then to the blockchain, so you could see where your crypto was, and did that for about 100 coins and did that for a while.
Okay. So now let's get into Ravencoin. Do you mind giving us a little bit of a simple explanation of what Ravencoin is?
Sure. So the simplest explanation is it's like Bitcoin, and then we added the ability to create your own asset. So if you're familiar with either Counterparty or Open Assets or Mastercoin, which is now Omni, any of those, they add the ability kind of on a second tier to allow you to create assets on the Bitcoin blockchain. We did the same thing, but by taking Bitcoin, forking code fork, not a chain fork, so you didn't get free Raven. That started from zero. So it was like Counterparty plus Bitcoin together. Mm-hmm. But then we were able to kind of remove some of the clunkiness because we have a kind of a tightly integrated system. So you're using one set of RPC calls to create assets and things like that. So that's kind of a tightly integrated system to create your own token.
Okay. Okay. And now you said there was it's not a fork necessarily of Bitcoin with the chain, but it's a code fork.
Code fork. I mean, we started with the most secure chain, which is Bitcoin, and the code from Bitcoin. We started with that. That was its base. And then we, of course, changed the name and network ID and port and all that thing. So it's its own coin. And then Raven itself, RVN, is actually a token like Bitcoin with its own market. It's on lots of exchanges. It has its own value, things like that. So that's the coin part of it. But then you can also create your own assets it costs 500 Raven. And you go in and you say, what's the name of the token? That has to be unique. How many you want? From anywhere from 1 to 21 billion with a B. You decide how many you want. Whether it's reissuable, meaning if you create less than 21 billion, you could create more later. And then you also, and this is somewhat unique to Ravencoin in that you can put your metadata. Metadata is information about what your token is into IPFS, which is easiest way to describe it. It's not ours, but it's an amazing technology. It's sort of like, think Dropbox meets BitTorrent kind of thing. You just throw your file in and then it's out there and other people can access it. But it gives you back an identifier for your file. And that identifier goes into Ravencoin when you create your asset and points to that file. And if the file changes, of course, it's not the same pointer anymore because the reference is actually a hash. that allows you to say what your token is about. And because the Ravencoin chain is immutable and the IPFS identifier that they give you back is immutable, it basically means no one can kind of tamper with that file, even though you've just kind of thrown it out there in the wild. No one can change it without your permission or whatever. That is the file. So
Okay.
the combination of IPFS and Ravencoin has opened up a whole raft of things, a whole amazing set of possibilities. We're extending on that in the next fork, in the next update to Ravencoin.
No, what were the main changes that you guys made to the Bitcoin code to improve upon to create Ravencoin?
Yeah, so it started with, it's kind of gone in two major phases so far, two major phases that have been released, and then another one coming soon. The first phase was just creating the token, and so the main I don't know if improvements is the word, but the main changes, right? We changed it to Raven, named it Ravencoin. We changed the port so that it's not conflicting or colliding with Bitcoin in any way. Changed the network ID for this kind of the same reason. Changed the addresses start with a capital R instead of a 1, so there's no confusion with, is this a Bitcoin address or a Ravencoin address? They're very separate. And then we increased the issuance schedule. So instead of starting like Bitcoin did with 50 BTC per block, we start with 5,000 Raven per block. And then we also sped up the block speed to 1 minute blocks. And then we also increased the block size to 2 megabyte blocks. So it has about 20x the capacity of Bitcoin, with no problems at all. That's gone fairly smooth. I think we could move it up a little bit from there, but there is limits to that. I don't think you can expand it forever, but I think we're well within the technical limits of the network speeds and things like that. Those were the main changes. So there will be, because of the way we did the math, and we did this on purpose, there will be 21 billion with a B Raven instead of 21 million M.
That's like 1,000x.
1,000x,
Okay.
1,000x the issuance. Yep, and we're I think at 3.8 billion issued so far. We're probably 1.5 years. Oh, the issuance, the halvening, the time which it shuts it. Halves the issuance is the same as Bitcoin, so 4 years or a certain number of blocks. It comes out to about 4 years.
Okay.
And so that's the same. So we're about 1.5 years into that 4 years.
And you guys are a fairly new project. It was the fork launched on January 3rd, 2018. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it was actually Bitcoin's 9th birthday, not by mistake. The Genesis block actually has an article from the same publication from the London Times talking about Bitcoin. We just happened to be, the odds were pretty slim, but we found the article talking about Bitcoin in the same publication, which is amazing, on Bitcoin's 9th birthday, and started it on that day. So
That's very cool.
Just for fun and ode to Bitcoin. And, we owe a lot to the Bitcoin and the developers. So, yeah.
That's very cool. And the one thing I do like about this project, and with just very, very similar to Bitcoin, is that it's very community driven.
Very much so.
One of the things that you guys didn't do, which I commend you immensely, was that there was no ICO, there was no funding involved. You guys didn't save any tokens for founders or any type of reward system. So it gave everybody, including yourself as a developer and Bruce Fenton, an equal opportunity to mine and buy right out the gate. So I commend you for doing that, because a lot of
absolutely, and I would credit Bruce Fenton with that. Former stockbroker, kind of knows the rules, knows that the ICOs were maybe not sort of legal gray area, and basically said, no, this has to be a fair launch. We're not taking any money. There's no developer set aside, things like that. So I fully credit him for kind of the design of that. And that's really been valuable, I think, for the project going forward, as the regulators kind of stepped in and said, wait a minute, you can't do some of these other things that happened, mostly during 2017. Right.
Which makes sense. The one thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm not sure how you'll comment on this, but in an interview with Naomi Brockwell that Bruce Fenton did, he said that tokens can be just as big as cash one day, and that tokens can come in lots of forms, like gaming, for gamified tokens, for gift certificates, for airline miles. But he said also securities, and that he's really interested in securities. So was this platform made and ideal to be utilized for securities?
I think so. I had already worked the year before, a year and a half before starting Ravencoin, with issuing the first bond issuance and looking at counterparty. I'd also worked for ANX International and doing open assets and things like that for an Explorer they were doing. Yeah, I think it has that capability. Now, I say that carefully in that it is a platform that can issue lots of different things, and a
Right.
security is just sort of a legal entity that in the U.S. and some Western countries
And yeah,
say,
let me correct myself. You
yeah,
guys have
yeah,
created a platform, a tool that can
correct,
be used for a lot of
tool,
different purposes, but securities
yes.
could be one of them.
Correct. Yes. In the same ways that you could, like a transfer agent could use an Excel spreadsheet to track, who owns what. Ravencoin is very well suited for that, for tracking what's essentially a cap table, or who owns which tokens. Yep.
So now that kind of goes into play with the thing about the messaging that you guys have implemented on your blockchain through Ravencoin.
Correct.
Because I've checked out a couple interviews. I'm a friend of Tiho from Arcane Bear. He asked you this in this same similar realm of questioning. But with the fact that you guys had this messaging system, it would allow to change a little bit of how Wall Street has done a lot of their activity because of the way that they have to message their shareholders and how
Yeah.
expensive and how timely that can be. Can you elaborate just a little bit so people can get a better understanding of what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. So that's actually on testnet now. So that's going to activate soon. It was on our roadmap from day one. Basically, messaging is this: the ability to for the clients. By clients, I mean like the iOS, the Android, or whatever, to basically put in front of the person, hey, we want to take a vote on, you happen to own this token, and we want to either take a vote, or we want you to switch tokens, or we want you, basically a message. Currently in the existing market system, you have the system where everything's kind of distributed, and it kind of came up through from the 1920s or whatever. These tokens, if someone wants to send a message to, let's say, a shareholder of Apple, they have to go to this Apple doesn't have a list of its shareholders. Those are held by Schwab and Fidelity and things like that. So there's this quasi monopoly organization you go to, and you say, I want a list of my shareholders, and they go out to all these organizations, say, send us a list. Well, they basically send a name and a mailing address. That's it. You don't get a phone number, you don't get an email, you don't get an inexpensive electronic way to contact them. You don't have a Telegram link, something like that. You get a mailing address and a name. So they basically then spend a bunch of money to get that list, and then they spend a bunch of money basically printing stuff out, envelopes, stuffing envelopes, putting proxy voting things in there with prepaid return addresses, things like that, and mail them out. Seems odd in this day and age, right, for all that to have to happen. And so as part of this, we basically said, well, what if there was a way so that the client could pop up and say, hey, the issuer of the token, the person who created this token, just wants you to know that, blah, blah, blah. And so we're building that in, and we're building it in so that it's not a private message. It's not an individual message like I'm gonna send something to Bob. It's basically a broadcast message to the holders of the token that says, hey, here's the and so that gives you the ability to do different things, like potentially notify people to vote, or you want to change the token, things like that. So that will be built in. Fairly simple mechanism. What we're going to do is basically have we have a special token. When you create a token, let's say for you create your own token, the Bob coin or something like that, right? So you have this token. You also get Bob coin with an exclamation mark, and that's your ownership token. And this ownership token has special powers, and one of the powers is the ability to issue new tokens, right? If you want to increase the quantity of Bob coin. What we're going to do is just say, send that token to yourself, and with it, attach a message that goes in IPFS. What will happen is the clients will see that and say, oh, this is a very special thing. We've actually assigned a message by the issuer of Bobcoin. It's basically sending it to himself, which is kind of a silly thing to do. Why would you send a token to yourself? But since there's a message attached to it, let's just display that message to all the holders of the Bobcoin. That's basically it. So relatively simple, but maybe very, very powerful. What people use it for, but yeah.
I definitely like that feature, and I like the fact that it can be utilized in the way that you're explaining, because I think that these technologies are disrupting things and disrupting not only industries, but currencies and things to that effect. So I like to see change being made, and I like what you guys are doing with this project.
We have one other feature that's coming with that, which is Memos, and we decided to add that kind of along the way, which is the ability when you transfer an asset, even to someone else, you can attach a message. The message, again, will go on IPFS, so it's not clogging up the chain, but it's also guaranteed that the person that was sending the token was the one that put the message in IPFS, because that immutable IPFS reference is on chain, right? Can't be changed, and is signed by the person doing the transfer. So you can't tamper with it and change the message. And that way it allows you to basically, you can put anything you want in there, like why it was sent, what the basis was, what the token's for, you can do all kinds of things with it. And it'll be interesting to see. People have used the metadata part of issuing the tokens in ways we had no idea. People are including entire movies. They'll issue the token, put a movie in IPFS. Doesn't clog up the chain. It's sitting over here. But that the issuer of the token basically published that movie, and people are doing that. Unexpected, but interesting.
Yeah, well, I guess when you create this platform, it was going to be used for a lot of different purposes, and I guess there's going to be some purposes you guys didn't even calculate or think of, or think, So it's limitless what you can do with this platform. So
it really is. Cool. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that you're the creator, but you're one of the co-creators or just the lead developer.
So I helped with kind of how we knew that we were going to create assets, and so it was kind of Bruce and I had kind of worked out. He had some ideas of what it was going to be. He definitely had the ideas for for it not being no pre-mine, all of that, and also kind of the brand, the Ravencoin. That was definitely Bruce. And then we kind of worked out how we were going to do issue assets, and messaging kind of came actually from a conference Bruce puts on, talking to some people there about messaging. And there was actually a coin that was having trouble because they issued on ERC20. It got really expensive, and they wanted to switch coins, but they couldn't tell their coin holders, hey, we're switching over to this other technology.
Right.
And in the same conversation, somebody said, yeah, I got the same problem. I've got a NASDAQ listed company, and I'm paying $20,000 to get my list, and then another $20,000, $30,000 just to mail them a letter. And so that was kind of the genesis of that idea. So that idea got brought in. And then some other ideas are being pulled in because there's some ERC20 experiments going on to do securities and whitelisting. We're doing tags and restricted assets, which will give you similar capabilities of restricting on-chain transfers to a subset of addresses that have either been KYC'd or things like that. And so those features are also in testnet now. And so that may give us an additional set of tools that issuers can use.
Okay, awesome. Are there any plans with the roadmap to make any additional changes in the foreseeable future or even long term with Ravencoin?
Yeah, so the two biggies, which require a hard fork, are in there now in testnet. Now, one of them has been activated, which is the messaging and memos, and then another one's activating soon, which is the tags and restricted assets. So those are two really big ones. They're going to take a little while to test and make sure that we don't cause any other trouble with kind of the existing system. So we've got a lot of testing to do on that. That's going to activate soon on testnet. We have dividends, which is the ability to say, oh, we've got all these token holders. I want to pay them in Raven. So I can get some Raven and say, I want to send this much Raven to all the token holders, except for maybe these three addresses, maybe because we found out they were bad actors, or perhaps they were, a treasury thing, which is, you don't want to send funds necessarily to your bank of addresses that you hold yourself. So you can exclude some addresses, and then the system just automatically figures out how to send it pro rata out to everybody. So that feature doesn't require a hard fork, and that's being worked on by a community member, and so that'll come soon. Okay. And then the other one, which is voting. So voting is very similar to issuing tokens to all your holders that are vote tokens, that they can send to different addresses to kind of represent that they want to go one direction or another, or choose a different option. So it can be done now. The problem is if you do that, issue a token, send it to everybody, and have them send the votes in. When the vote's over, those sit in the UTXO in the mempool, or not the mempool, but in the UTXO set, right? So they're sitting there kind of like held forever in case they need to be sent again. And that's kind of a waste if you've done a vote and you really don't need those tokens anymore. So it'll be a kind of an efficient version of a token that will kind of expire after certain times, so that the resources of the chain don't have to worry about those anymore. And so that's another feature that we'll be looking at.
Sounds very awesome. I'm looking forward to those changes. And
yeah.
It sounds like with one of the changes that you could essentially offer shares of your company using Ravencoin, and then pay your shareholders dividends in the way that you see fit.
Yes, as a tool, absolutely. That's it's probably legal in some jurisdictions. It's possible or legal as long as you kind of follow all the regulatory rules in the
Right.
U.S. But yeah, so I just don't want to recommend that someone just do that without kind of checking with an attorney. But the tool set is absolutely there to do it.
Okay. Now,
Yep.
is Ravencoin the only project that you're working on now, or is there anything else that you're getting your hands into?
Yeah, so I work on various different projects within Medici. So I just help get pulled into meetings and kind of help with other. We do a lot of we have own 19 blockchain companies, are not owned, but portions of them have invested in portfolio companies, and so I get pulled into those every once in a while to kind of help out.
Okay, cool. Well, Tron, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to this interview. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap things up?
No, I really appreciate you doing the interview. We don't have a marketing department, so anything that we can tell people about Raven and get them to know about it and play with it. Community's great. Come in. It's friendly. Jump in the Discord, Telegram, ask questions, get started. Doesn't cost you anything. Try it, play with it. So yeah, it's a fun project.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, man. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first time ever checking out any of my content. Please make sure you check out my channel, do some exploring. Got all kinds of different content. If you like what I'm doing, support me by subscribing, giving us thumbs up, sharing, and commenting. And as always, I want to appreciate you, Tron, taking the time to do this interview. I encourage you as all to be the change by practicing change. And I love you all.